So PAGA is the Private Attorney General's Act, designed by the California legislature to help alleviate some of the burden that was on the labor commissioner in enforcing the labor code penalties that were available for only the labor commissioner to enforce throughout California. And the labor commissioner back in 2003, 2004 was under budget, understaffed as still is now. And Governor Gray Davis signed PAGA into law to incentivize or to promote the enforcement of these civil penalties through private litigation. So the private individual could file a lawsuit through PAGA to collect these civil penalties that the labor commissioner was only entitled to enforce before PAGA. And they called it and still some people refer to it as the bounty hunter law, because it gave the employees this incentive to collect these penalties, civil penalties, from their employer, and 75% of those penalties would go to the state, and the employees then could keep 25% of the penalties. In addition to the big driver of these cases are the attorney's fees and costs as well. So a prevailing plaintiff can get their attorney's fees and costs on top of the penalties. But as we talk about the penalties, 25% is very small that goes to the employees. And that's part of the issue that employers have with the law. Now, PAGA, as I mentioned, permits the aggrieved employees to collect these civil penalties for labor code violations that the labor commissioner could only collect in the past. Now, PAGA says, look, if the labor code doesn't provide for a civil penalty, it will set one at $100 per employee per pay period for the first violation and $200 per pay period per employee for a subsequent violation. As I mentioned, 75% of the penalties collected have to go to the LWDA and 25% is distributed among the employees. I wanted to point out here too, it's per pay period. So employers that are going to a weekly pay period are increasing the amount of penalties by doing that versus going to a every other week or bi-weekly pay period. If you're going weekly payments to your employees, you're basically double the penalties, doubling up on the penalties. So it's something to consider going forward. The statute of limitations too for PAGA claims is going back 1 year because these are penalties. So generally these cases, it's 1 year from the date they filed the lawsuit. I wanted to put an example up here to show how quickly these PAGA penalties can multiply. And in this example, we've got the employee is being paid weekly. So we've got weekly pay periods, and the penalties are kicking in each week. And we've got a 2-year period here. So the statute of limitations, as I mentioned, can go back 1 year from prior to when they filed the lawsuit. But if it takes a year to get the case tried or settled, that time period will continue to accrue after the lawsuit is filed. So it could extend. Well, it will extend once the lawsuit is filed up until the case is resolved. So with just 100 employees, you could see with these calculations, you could easily get to $5 million for these different violations if they're alleged. And that's not including the costs and plaintiff's attorney's fees as well. So those would be in addition to the $5 million. So you can see these penalties add up quickly. And also in the case last summer, Viking River Cruises noted in its briefing to the U.S. Supreme Court that there's substantial penalties for these small technical violations as well. So the civil penalties of 100 or 200 per violation per pay period for violations such as not including the start date for the pay period on a pay stub. And that was this case brought against Chipotle. And also another case was brought for the omission of the last 4 digits of an employee's social security number on the wage statement. And so these small little details can lead to major liability. And that's what's so concerning for California employers across the state.